I want to talk a little bit about asynchronous communication. Well, what is asynchronous communication? It's kind of like writing snail mail letters. You know, you draft your idea, you proof it, make corrections, print it, put it in an envelope, mail it, forget about it, and then sometime later you get a response where the person can similarly think about it, have time to kind of formulate their response, and then come back to you. And so it involves very slow
and deliberate.
I think it's a mental state where you think, you really think and formulate your response before you send it, and it means that you totally give yourself an opportunity to absorb the communication you got, because you really want to make sure that your response encapsulates everything related to the communication you got, plus any new ideas that you wish to share with the person. And it doesn't just have to be in snail mail letters. It can also be in fax, email. You can even do it over chat. I sometimes when I send chat or text messages, one thing I can do is I can schedule them. That's an example of asynchronous. When you schedule a text message, you don't expect the person to respond as soon as you sent it, because you literally scheduled it for another time. Now, some people don't like them. They find it confusing because they think that they can respond right away and then be in a live conversation. But the whole point around scheduling a text message is that if you know that the person maybe has a sick elderly parent and has to leave their phone beside their bed all the time, you don't want to wake them and trigger them to maybe think that it's news about their parent or something, then yeah, you schedule it to go out at a reasonable time in the morning instead of when you had the idea at 11:30 p.m. or something. So, and then email is the same thing. I think a lot of people respect that emails are asynchronous, but I think there was a time when people felt they had to respond to emails as quickly as possible. I think certainly BlackBerry contributed to that in a big way. People were just quickly writing responses. Yeah, the opposite of asynchronous communication is real-time communication, which would be telephone calls, Zoom calls, or real-time chat, or real-time texting. Hell, even another example of asynchronous communication is if someone goes to Mars, because the speed of light takes something like, it can, I don't know, I'm going to guess off the top of my head anywhere from 4 to 30 or 40 minutes. In fact, it can take even longer. If Earth and Mars are on other sides of the sun from each other, it can almost be impossible to communicate, and you would kind of need some kind of intermediary satellite to get it. And so the point is that when you're talking to someone over video chat who's on Mars, it's going to be, you can't be like, how are you, and then just wait around for the response, because it's going to take a long time to get a response. So it's more like trading voicemails or video messages, like I'm literally doing right now. You record your video message, you press send, you go off and do your business, and then you come back and get your response later. That is asynchronous communication. I want to talk a little bit about why I like asynchronous communication. I grew up in a family full of chatterboxes. I mean, there were just the four of us, my brother and I, my parents. But I was the youngest, and when the four of us were in the same room together, I feel like I kind of never got a word in edgewise. And on their own, they're all great communicators and listeners. One-on-one, they're fantastic. But yeah, and the next thing, I guess, that sort of perpetuated the challenge is when I was 19, I decided to go to live in Japan and become fluent in Japanese. And that was great, and I achieved that goal. But while I was doing that, I spent a lot of time just listening, and so it kind of reinforced me being the person who does more listening than talking. And so anyway, one of the advantages of learning Japanese is that working in Tokyo as an IT engineer, people in IT already a lot of times don't have the best communication skills, and then you add the bilingual, bicultural component on top of that. It means it's a lot of opportunities for people like myself who can kind of bridge those gaps. And so I found myself working for multinational corporations, American corporations in Tokyo. And one of them in particular was a very New York-centered organization. That old New Yorker magazine cover of Manhattan, the center of the world, and then a little Chicago and a little LA, and then finally on the horizon, China and Japan are just these little bumps. I mean, that pretty much well summed up the mentality of that organization. Very headquarters-centered, very New York-centered organization. And while I was there, I really saw a lot of problems with sort of workflows and collaboration and communication. And I really sort of dedicated myself to try to address those by means of setting up knowledge-sharing repositories and systems for better communication. And ultimately, it was really more about, asynchronous communication. I mean, I even saw, even in Tokyo, there would be kind of like this subject matter expert on something, and then, everyone would be like, kind of go up to his desk and be like, oh, what's the answer to this? And then, he would help them out, and then, or whatever. But I was like, I feel like it would be a lot more efficient if we kind of just dumped that subject matter expert's knowledge all inside the knowledge base for people to easily consume. But with that said, organizationally, it wasn't really set up that way. I mean, it wasn't in that SME's best interest to do that. He was getting rewarded for being an SME. And it kind of continued that way. But Tokyo was one thing, but New York was even worse. They didn't even really have time zone awareness. I mean, I would respond at 11 p.m. their time, and they would, like, this guy would get angry at me. Why would you respond to me so late? I guess he's got his phone beside his bed, and maybe he was waiting for a critical communication. I feel bad if that's true, but I was like, this is regular work hours for me. I guess because I didn't have a Japanese name, he just assumed that I was in North America. But nonetheless, it wasn't just about the time zone awareness. It was also really about the ways of communicating. I mean, I would see an issue arise at like 10 a.m. New York time, and then I might be a member of a distribution list which was on the CC, so I would see like the whole thread. And so it would start at 10 a.m. and then 2 more replies before 11, and then it would stop for a while, and then at 1 it would revive, and then by 3 or 4, maybe the problem would just kind of resolve itself. And I would kind of look over this and just think about all the people that were engaged in this, that how did they get any work done? Really having all those interruptions throughout the day must be really, really disturbing. And I thought to myself, like, I really felt lucky that I was able to focus on work and have this dedicated time without interruptions, where, I could get some problems to work on in the morning. I had all day to work on them without interruptions, and then, feel really good about the solution I offered, and then send it off, and then just, forget about it. And, with that said, occasionally I would get emails at 11, p.m. my time asking for clarification and things like that. And, anyway, I kept, like I said, pushing on these problems and these use cases, and eventually they got noticed by the knowledge management department in the New York office, and they actually recruited me to come and help them out on those systems. And this was very exciting for me. I was really, my hopes were very high. I was going to, bring about all of these wonderful both digital transformations, but also cultural transformations to really improve the organization. And so I embarked on this. And so a couple of months later, I found myself in New York in a meeting with people just talking over each other one after another. And it was a real culture shock for me. And I had to, despite the fact that I had these ambitions and dreams of bringing about cultural transformation in New York, I ended up spending a lot more time getting educated myself on local cultural practices, and that was fine. That was what needed to happen. But no, I did make I think a lot of progress in implementing Q&A systems and encourage their use as a replacement for email, so that when new employees would get onboarded, they could read up on all these other questions that had been answered before, instead of not being part of CC threads and emails that they were never a member of because they hadn't joined the company yet. And so that plus the collaborative knowledge bases, I think we really did start to make a transformation to make the organization more collaborative. And then Slack came along. And now with that said, I'd always kind of been fighting email and chat programs up until that point, but it was kind of hard to argue with Slack, because one of the things that Slack did that previous chat programs didn't is that they actually made searching chat histories much easier. And so, potentially a new employee could get onboarded and then just search the public or team Slack threads and find answers in them. But with that said, there's a lot of garbage, a lot of huge heaps of chat threads to go through, and it's really not an easy way to get answers. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the only way to get answers, but I sort of found myself in a fight to try to reinforce the using of the Q&A forums instead of Slack. And many times it was a losing battle, and so we kind of tried to find a way to integrate the two better, including chat transcript archiving integrations. My problem with chat programs in general is that I really feel
these chat programs led us to stream of consciousness dumping without really formulating our messaging in advance. And
the risk is if that becomes your modus operandum forever, that's just how you work from 9 to 5, then you're working extremely inefficiently. And that's really what I see as the battlefield right now in digital transformation. I said that my mission was to bring about cultural transformation, but I think more than ever now, I feel like, well, that's really paramount. It's not just enough to bring in a new system, a new tool, and expect that that's going to bring about the kind of change that you imagine. You have to have the mentality around the discipline around organizing your knowledge and communication in a way that will turn it into a capital investment.
There's one principle in technical writing called every page is page one. And the whole idea is that if you're doing a web search on a problem and you come across the documentation, that any page that you land on should give you enough information to solve the problem that you're on, which differs considerably with traditional manuals, which were almost sort of authored so that you would read them from start to finish and then know the product completely. And so really, we try to apply the same principle to the Q&A forums, that if you come across a page, and this is true of Stack Overflow, it's true of Quora, that if you come across a Q&A page, you should literally have all the context to understand the question and the answer, or the answers if there's more than one, and to get a full, well-rounded understanding of the conversation when you've left that page without having to read a bunch of other related pages to get the full context. And so ultimately, that type of communication, the ROI on that is just so huge. You avoid so much waste that when you get back into that lowest common denominator brain consciousness dump type of threads, your organizational efficiency just skyrockets. And so once again, I find myself in this struggle to get people out of Telegram and out of Signal and out of WhatsApp group chats back into, even if it's an email, and even with emails themselves, try to have, one conversation at a time. I mean, this is even true with real world conversations. So often in real world conversations, people are like, well, what about this and what about that, and go off on tangents. Or maybe if it's an awkward conversation, they put in some logical fallacies and a straw man argument. But these are essentially, again, splinters and diversions from the original conversation. And so I think if you are really disciplined about having a kind of one topic at a time conversation, then you can be much more efficient. You can kind of take care of one issue at a time and then get on to other issues, instead of having one topic splinter 5 different conversations and really have none of them get addressed properly. So I'm still in the same struggle I was 10 years ago, trying to champion more asynchronous conversations. And I think that people will once again get Slack fatigue, Microsoft Teams fatigue, chat fatigue in general, and kind of come back to a place where they realize they need to be more methodical in the way that they communicate in order to get work done and more efficiently. And I hope to report back new insights on achieving this in the future. And so please stay tuned for more thoughts from Nick on this topic. Thanks for watching.